All right. What's up, Middlekoff? What's up, world? Don't forget, subscribe to our channel. We appreciate that. Hit that like button. Half of you are not subscribed. That's what the analytics tell us. And John's a big analytics guy. So hit that subscribe button.
Love those numbers, baby. Also, podcast below in the description. Make sure you subscribe to that as well.
All right, we'll get to some of your takes. But, John, let's start with a question that's been flying around. I read Matt Barrows in The Athletic wrote about this today, and I popped over to our mailbag, and I saw a question in there about this. So you can subscribe, get in the mailbag by going to Apple Podcast and leaving us a review. This is but this is a fucking novel. But here, the highlighted parts. Here's the question. Am I crazy to see parallels between the Niners picking Trey Lance third and the Warriors taking James Wiseman second overall? If/when Trey Lance is dealt, it should not come as a surprise. After all, it increasingly seems like reports about the team's initial interest in Mac Jones were true. Trey has yet to win the starting position, and the Niners don't seem to believe that a mobile quarterback is necessary to elevate their offense. This is actually a little astute point that I didn't highlight here. This reviewer points out that other teams who are all in on a more mobile quarterback, Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, at some point Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, get a backup quarterback like that quarterback. That's not what the Niners did with Trey Lance. Then at the bottom, he says, too long, didn't read. This is one of my favorite podcasts, and I'll be here listening when Trey Lance is traded. So this person is writing as if it's inevitable that Trey Lance is eventually traded, John. What do you think?
Well, I've thought long and hard about this because I've seen, on the internet streets, guy, this topic has been popping.
Yes, it has been.
It has been. And, I talked to a friend yesterday who was making one of his classic drives from pro day to pro day. And we're just banging off topics. And Trey came up. And we talked about the value of Trey Lance. I'm like,
who brought him up?
Well, I mean, I did. We both kind of did. Just talking about draft picks and failed draft picks. And, it's just this time of year is a lot about philosophical beliefs, guys that have just succeeded and failed, right? It's why Ron Rivera immediately brings up Purdy when he's relating to Sam Howell. You wouldn't bring up like Baker Mayfield. Like you bring up what's fresh, what's new, and what's worked if you want to go positive. And if you want to go negative, you go with what doesn't work. It's why everyone's been pounding the table. Josh Allen, when comparing these projects. Anthony Richardson is like, Josh Allen meets Cam Newton. You wouldn't go, Josh Richardson, a lot like Trey Lance. People are like, whoa, right? And we talked about what is his trade value. Now, to me, I was like, I think you'd be very hard-pressed to get a third-round pick, meaning, that means you're out of the second day of the draft. He said fourth round, and that's basically a flyer. James Wiseman, good example, who, again, statistically, I think has been doing pretty well. I heard Russillo said, he watches more NBA than like NBA GMs, so he thinks he looks pretty good, given like raw talent or whatever on a shitty team. He got traded for nothing. Now, his factor was like his salary next year is $12 million. Trey's salary.
Luxury tax. And it really ballooned their luxury tax payment.
I think the complicated part with trading a first-round pick is next year immediately at the end of, the 23 season, you got to pick up a fifth-year option, right? So I don't think he's going to get traded this offseason. Like, I think it's a non-starter given that I don't think they get a good enough pick. Like a fourth-round pick to the Niners, given that they have 17 thirds, isn't as important. To me, if they didn't have any threes, I do think you would have to just entertain some options. But they have those threes. They're going to be able to get some cheap players. I do think in season, though, things are on the table, right? A lot like James Wiseman. They weren't going to give up on him early. But when they gave up on him, his value was even lower. Like, if Trey's value goes up, that means he's valuable to the 49ers. I think they're looking at this. This is either going to be a sunk cost, which they've already feels like they've pivoted down that street, or he finally hits and we benefit from that, which we've already paid for it. So I think if he were to get traded, it would be in season, kind of like, let him go to an opportunity of a shitty team or a team that just wanted to take a flyer on him, meaning that the Darnold-Purdy situation they felt pretty good with. Like they had two quarterbacks, which you could argue is risky, but I think that would be the time he's traded, would be in season. I don't see any scenario that he's traded before the season starts, unless Purdy comes back fully healthy. They love Sam Darnold, and someone's like, hey, we'll give you a third-round pick for him right now, and they do that, which I still believe that it's pretty risky given just the quarterback injuries of their history and of the individuals that they have, including Trey.
You're saying, let me make sure I'm hearing you. You're saying even though you don't think he's worth a third, if somebody offered them a third before the season, they should probably still say no to that, given that would leave them with just a healthy Sam Darnold as their quarterback.
I think I'm getting a little ahead of myself. That's like talking training camp. I think as of the day, even a third-round pick to the Niners, they say no to.
Yeah.
And there is no pick that they're going to get offered his league value that makes it worth it for them to do it today. Like if someone offered him a first today, I think they would do it, right?
Have to.
They're not getting offered.
That person would.
Yeah, it's not happening. So to me, it's worth it for them to play it out. But I do think there is a scenario where he's traded in October. There is a scenario. And that would mean to me his value is worse than it is even today, because that would mean he probably got beat out in OTA/training camp. Purdy came back, and he's like their third quarterback. So they're basically just trading him almost like you get an opportunity, we'll eat the cost. Because they're eating the cost. They've already paid the big salary, right? They just kind of let someone else make the decision. Do you want to pick up the fifth-year option? Do you want to work with this project?
Yeah. I think there's an October scenario where, let's say he beats out Sam Darnold barely, plays a game, looks good, not great, fine, but Brock Purdy, or just beats him out in camp, but then Brock Purdy comes back, and Brock is better than Trey, and Brock Purdy's the starter. The Niners are, pleasantly impressed with Trey, but also think Sam Darnold's more than adequate to be the backup quarterback. Brock is humming along. Tennessee's quarterback gets hurt, Tennessee decides to pivot. Somebody that kind of likes Trey decides to pivot. And in that scenario, he's upped his stock a little, but Brock has returned and still looks better than him. Because I think if we get to October, Brock looks good. November, Brock looks good. And Brock is no longer just the guy that played 7-8 games, but Brock is now definitely the guy that you're investing in moving forward. Now you start thinking about 2024, where Trey Lance then would be an expensive backup, which this regime hasn't done it, but the organization has done it. It's okay to have an expensive backup. You've got a cheap starter, but then you factor in the fifth-year option to it. I guess you could have a scenario where Trey is back, the backup quarterback in 2024, without having picked up his fifth-year option. But that's a pretty expensive backup quarterback for you to have on the team if you don't believe in him enough to pick up his fifth-year option.
I see zero chance that he would be back in 24 if he's not the starter / fifth-year option getting picked up.
Yeah, because he'd have to impress them enough for them to think he's worth what's his contract going to be in year 4, $10 million.
Yeah.
To be the backup quarterback. And that's probably unlikely that you can walk that line of being worth $10 million, but not worth being the starter.
Yeah. I think he's the best 49er aggregator. That's actually a real human, not like a business. This is Akash. And Breer went on Rich Eisen.
Might be the best in Israel, though.
Yeah, that's true. But he's focused on national. Akash picks up everything 49er related and just keeps it right in my feed.
Yeah.
Albert Breer went on Rich Eisen. And obviously, I was thinking about it today. The NFL is just running circles around every league for multiple reasons. But they have all these points throughout the offseason. Combine, everyone talks. Then they just have this arbitrary owners meetings, but the coaches and GMs also have to attend. They all have to talk. Then there is a pre-draft press conference that you have to do as either a coach, GM, or a duo. Then after the draft, your coach and GM literally talk every single night. So the amount from early February through the end of April, the amount of information coming of just like Gutekunst says something, Mora says something, boom, Belichick says something, and it just keeps coming. Then OTAs start, and your coaches are again obligated to talk as well as players. I mean, the NFL, good business model going right now. But the Trey Lance, I would say, is a top 3 conversation coming out that, he's not the starting quarterback, probably behind Lamar and Rodgers. And Breer basically paraphrased through Akash that the 49ers wanted 2022 as Trey Lance's kind of development year, as they were good, right? We're willing to sacrifice kind of their ceiling for the bigger picture. Clearly that didn't happen. He got injured. They are not willing to do that in 2023, which they've laid out for us. Right? They haven't said those specific words, but it was clear through their words. And will play the best quarterback available. So his window was really those first 2 years. Jimmy happened to be on the team. He didn't get to start, even though he kind of did for a couple games. And then last year he got injured. So it's derailed kind of his career. Because one of the talking points I've seen with the people like, he deserves better than this, which is pretty crazy. I mean, this is one of the best 4 teams in the league. Like it's an incredible spot to go to. We talk so many quarterbacks who have failed often talk about like, God, it was not an easy situation to be in. Like it doesn't get any better.
Right. And not that this one is easy. It's challenging in its own way, but
yeah, that
it has its advantages.
I do think that if he cannot beat out Sam Darnold, however that situation, if it, I do think it'll bleed into training camp and OTAs will probably be a smaller sliver. His time with the 49ers is then on borrowed time. Whether it's through the trade deadline, whether it's after the season, but I think it's officially then. It would be unofficially over at that moment.
Yeah.
Now, he might stay on the team, but
he wouldn't be back in 24.
He would not be back in 24. And I do think, depending on how health-wise, you would entertain trying to do right by him too, right? Just trading him if you could get a 4th-round pick at the deadline or something. And I think other teams should be interested just as a trial run, especially teams that suck and don't have quarterbacks yet, right? Quarterbacks are assets.
Yeah.
And you can buy low. It's like the stock market. It's like some of these stocks fucking, Netflix 6 months ago was at like $120. You look up now, it's like $340. Like you get the opportunity. I'm not saying he's going to do that, but you're going to be able to get for cheap. Once upon a time, the Patriots got Randy Moss for a 4th-round pick. Again, I'm not saying Trey is that guy, but low flyers, especially, you don't have to pick up the 5th-year option. So then maybe you get a backup quarterback.
But I think that would be the argument for acquiring him before this year is over. You would love to acquire him, play him for 2 months, and then go, let's pick up the 5th-year option on this guy. I think there's a lot. I think
Wiseman style, right?
Wiseman style. There's a much. The more you think about it, if Brock's healthy and playing well, it makes a lot more sense for the acquiring team to acquire Trey this year before the trade deadline than in the offseason. Given that he has 1 year left on his deal, he'll make $10 million in 2024. And then, if he plays kind of like what the Niners did in a different way with Garoppolo, got him, played him, extended him, right? Yeah. Based on how he played for them. Not the same thing, obviously, but as opposed to doing what like the Panthers did with Sam, where you acquired him having never played him and then had to decide whether or not to pick up the 5th-year option on him before he'd even played a game for you, right? Darnold.
Tampa Bay would be a good example, right? Let's say they're 1-3 or 1-6. Baker Mayfield, pointless for them, right? Won't be back the following year. And they go, well, we're no lock to get the number 1 or 2 pick. We might as well, we're just always churning that wheel. If we can get the guy for a conditional 4th, let's just take a flyer on the guy. That to me feels like it's destiny if this offseason is rocky.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, I said yesterday, yesterday or Tuesday, I guess, we were talking about tie. Does the tie go to Trey? Does the tie go to Darnold? And I said Trey, and you said Sam. That's where, from the Niners' perspective, the tie would go to Sam, because all things being now, to me, that's a little different. Like week 1, if they're tied and Brock's not healthy, I go, let's see what Trey's got. But in the world where you can trade one of them, you keep Darnold and you trade Lance in terms of, being Brock's backup.
To me, the week 1, like on the fence, gets back to what I think we've been talking about the last couple of weeks is, for an organization that's led by the coach in terms of decision-making when it comes to the team, like on the field, I do think the locker room would have some juice on that bad boy. Their core group of, team captains. Trey wasn't one last year. I think, if they were leaning one way, like if they were indifferent, like, hey, it's been even, just...
Well, a tie is a tie, right? I'm with you. If it's not a tie and the locker room wants one guy, then
And realistically, there's really no such thing as a tie in a quarterback situation. Like it usually plays itself out in my experience of going to these situations.
Yeah, part of the tie usually is like, well, he wasn't as good, but we spent a 3rd-round pick on him, so that helps with the tie. Or he's more expensive, so
exactly. The tie is actually rigged.
Yeah, the tie is rigged, right? I'm talking about it.
I don't think this one's rigged at all. I think they're just going to go into who's better.
Oh, I agree. And the reason I agree with you, in part, is because I think Kyle actually believes that he can make Sam Darnold a good quarterback. So in his mind, it's win-win.
100%.
Which might be foolish, but that's what he believes.
Yeah.
So
I don't think it's foolish in the sense of like what they paid to get him, right? They didn't invest that much in him. It's kind of your classic.
He's young. They liked him previously. He's been in bad situations. The irony is he was in such bad. He played for Gase, and he played for Rule. As you said the other day, he played for 2 coaches who will not be head coaches again. And then if the Niners were to trade Trey Lance, let's say, in October, the acquiring story, whoever acquires him, the story would be, he was just in a tough spot. It was a tough spot for him, which is true. We've talked about it. So does that mean the ideal situation for a quarterback is bad team, good quarterback, good coach?
Yeah, I mean, I just think usually in the NFL, good team, bad team, the creams just historically rose. There have been outlier instances like a Rich Gannon. I think Jim Plunkett was late in his career, had success. Remember, like he won with the Raiders later.
Steve Young was good before the Niners got him.
Was he the number 1 overall pick?
Yeah, but he was number 1, and then he got traded because the Bucs had the number 1. I think they had the number 1 pick again, and took Vinny Testaverde from Miami.
So
Miami, Kozar was Miami.
I think they both were.
Okay.
The days of just that 6'4" guy that can't really move, those used to be all the names in our youth. Now they don't exist. Like Anthony Richardson's doing backflips down the sideline.
I know. Though, like that's the way we talk about it in the draft, and then the season starts, and it's like, all right, who can win from the pocket?
Well, you still have to win with the pocket, but you have to be mobile.
Yes.
Part of just there's
so which
less
one's more important? Like Rosen didn't fail because he wasn't mobile. He failed because he couldn't win within the pocket.
I think in 2023, and this is what they were going for with Trey Lance, you have to be able to do both. Tom Brady was really the last of a dying breed because there just aren't like Steve Hutchinsons and Larry Allens and even like Jason Kelsey. The offensive linemen I've heard in this draft are fucking terrible. Yet the D linemen, like there are just a ton of pass rushers. So you're just constantly running around.
I don't agree. Because if you took a quarterback and gave him the reverse of Jared Goff's skills, so made him as good a runner as Goff is a passer from the pocket, and you made him as good a passer from the pocket as Goff is a runner, that quarterback would be a disaster. That level of thrower would be awful. That guy doesn't play.
But Goff has maximized his talent,
yes,
and he is like average.
Well, I'm just saying, but he can play. Like if you are a Goff level. What Goff is as a runner, if you're that as a thrower, you cannot survive.
Agreed. No, I'm not diminishing that, like, you have to be able to play from within the pocket.
I'm just saying that guy is not dead yet because I'm watching Jared Goff.
I'm not saying he's dead yet either. I'm just saying, like, where the league keeps trending, the best players in the league, you have to agree, are all have mobility.
I do agree. And it's partly like I think guys that maybe once upon a time played another position play quarterback now. I don't know what has led to this. But
Purdy, for example, Purdy would not be as good if he had Yerzurai's athleticism, correct? Like one of the things that made him a
if he had Goff's
player.
athleticism, he would not be as good.
Good point. Phillip Rivers, right? Kirk Cousins, like one of his success, the thing that allocates like his ability.
Roethlisberger. We just keep naming quarterbacks that Kyle has either coached or called.
But the one thing with Big Ben when he was young, he was a badass. Like he could tackle. He had a little Cam Newton to him.
Yeah.
Behind the line. I'm not talking past the line of scrimmage. I'm just talking keeping plays alive. Remember like Rivers last couple of years? Like this guy cannot move.
Yeah.
He's like, Kyle, I'm in.
Let's just do a quick. What's your Phillip Rivers last year in the NFL stat guess? Touchdowns, interceptions.
It actually wasn't that. I think he threw some picks, but he threw 29 touchdowns.
24 and 11, 68%.
I think they had a good.
Because last year with the Chargers, he threw 20 picks. 23
he throws a lot of interceptions.
But Brendan says, let's not act like
when he cried, right?
Yeah.
Remember at the last Charger press conference, was like, "Give it everything I had."
Yeah.
So he tried to justify his picks, like, "I never cared about stats." It's like, Rivers, Philip, we know, we watched you play. You made a lot. I can't. I mean, how many interceptions? Like, do you vividly remember sitting on your couch at 4:00 in Pacific Standard?
Yeah. 4:15 Pacific.
Average 9 interceptions a year in that time window.
In that window. Brennan says, let's not act like Purdy's that much more athletic than Goff. I think he is more athletic than Goff.
What are you talking about?
Significantly more athletic than Goff. If you watch, we referenced it the other day, Brennan, but Javon Hargrave on NFL Network the other day said the scouting report before the NFC Championship game, what stood out to the defensive lineman was how mobile Purdy was, how difficult he was to tackle.
Yeah, I think as of today, it's not even really close. I'm just pulling up some of their draft measurables. Their 40 time, Jared Goff's 40 out of college wasn't that bad. It's like 4.8. But the 10-yard split dramatically better. The shuttle times. Jared Goff's college athletic numbers were not super terrible. He's gotten much slower over time. They actually athletically have similar testing numbers.
Interesting. Well,
but remember, wasn't one of Purdy's things his 10-yard split similar to Christian McCaffrey?
Yeah.
Jared does not play.
Sorry,
I bet if you just took Jared Goff, like when he was coming out of Cal, or those first couple years with the Rams, on a basketball court, a lot like Nick Foles when he was young, athletically, you just put him in a YMCA, he'd be the best athlete there. Yet as they've aged, their foot quickness feels like in concrete.
So I'm right. No, you're not right.
No, well, he's dramatically better athlete on the field. But when they tested, they were similar, right? I think the example is like Devontae ran slow out of college. Remember, part of the thing was like, he's like almost a 4.6 guy. How's he going to get open? Like speed. No one's like, Devontae's slow. Like sometimes you test much for whatever reason. You put the pads on, as Belichick says. We're not playing football at the combine. We're playing football on the football field in pads.
Is this the 10-yard split, 95th percentile versus 52nd percentile? Is that what it was?
I do think that Jared Goff, in fairness to him, underrated athlete coming out of college.
But see, John, I remember watching him play the 49ers. He could not. He was a sitting duck.
He doesn't play athletically. Like his athleticism doesn't shine.
It doesn't translate to the pocket, which is
or
where
just to his game.
It's like where you work.
I mean, even just like as a runner, right? You remember? I remember going down a rabbit hole one night. I might have been intoxicated. Peyton Manning's Tennessee highlights. Oh. And even I've seen interviews over the years, and it kind of makes sense. Like he makes fun of I used to actually be a pretty good athlete. You watch him at Tennessee, you're like, this guy can fucking move. He wasn't just some stiff in the pocket. Like he was mobile. Some of his great plays were scrambling around. Maybe you just lose it immediately. I don't know.
Let's see how Brock comes back from an off-season surgery. I know it's not a leg surgery. It's not from the waist. Let's just see. He got hit in the pocket, physically traumatizing injury. Let's see if there's any mental after effects of that injury.
There's also, does Jared Goff have more like more baseball athleticism? Like Tom Brady drafted in baseball. For baseball, he was a good athlete.
He's tall, more moving parts. Maybe it's just a little harder.
Wouldn't you say he's probably the most made fun of great athlete ever in terms of his athleticism?
Tom and Peyton, honestly, feels like Peyton's up there too. Tom's draft photo is what contributes.
Yeah. I mean, Peyton gets
boxers.
Peyton, I think, gets the benefit of the doubt because he was like, he was still the number 1 overall pick. It's like, look at this scrub athlete who ran a 5.0. Yeah. Tom's even said in interviews, I could not start at any other position for a good high school team. So it's not like, he's not acting like he's a better athlete than he is. Yeah. Even though we consider him one of the greatest athletes of all time.
Yeah, I don't know if I believe that.
What position would he play?
Well, it'd have to be probably receiver, right?
But he's too slow. How would he get open?
In high school? He's tall.
But you're just throwing like fade routes?
Yeah. Like it's some kid who's like thinking about geometry, like
What if Tom's like, I don't have great hands?
Yeah, I don't know. He's probably got a good hand-eye. Here we had another comment that was going to back it up with too bad it'll probably get traded now. So people are ready for it. That was Kurt on the YouTube. Let me see here. I'm not going to go to that one yet. It's John B says Kyle knows Purdy won't be ready week 1 and preparing a QB battle between Trey and Sam. Lynch, on the other hand, is playing God and acting like he knows for a fact Purdy will be back and ready for week 1. Thankfully, Kyle is ultimately the one who decides. Lance will have to play his ass off, though, through the offseason and preseason to retake the starting role, and I think he will. So, we can address some of the specifics here, but I think one thing John B hit on here in the comments is that it does feel like to some people there is a difference of where Kyle is and where John is. Are they not on the same page? Or are they both just, or does nobody knows anything and they're just, as you're trying to find a way to say something, you don't say exactly the same thing?
I actually just think their responses represent what John said at his press conference. Like, Kyle gives me a lot of shit for being overly optimistic, basically essentially saying Kyle can be overly negative. One guy just skews like on the pendulum of positivity and negativity. If you had to put like, where does Belichick rank? He skews like where Kyle is. I would say John, relative to the NFL, probably one of the more optimistic people, head coach, GM in the NFL. You could argue he might be the most.
Doesn't need it.
Doesn't need it. When you hear him talk.
You think that's why? He just doesn't need it?
No, I think it's kind of his personality. I mean, I would say as a player, through as a broadcaster, just one of those universal guys that was like, John Lynch, man, great fucking guy. What a dude. Like, just, I'm trying to think of guys in other sports. None come to mind immediately, but like, it feels like Sean McVay. Like when you hear him talk, like, what a bundle of joy. And then you see like his actions, like, can't stand this player, cut this guy, trade this guy. Like Sean McVay's. I would just put Steve up there, but I've seen Steve be kind of crazy. I
mean, the job of the coach is a little more.
Steve's probably closer to the middle.
When I think about Steve as like an analyst, I think it was more Lynchish, right?
Yeah.
Than like a Van Gundy or whatever, some other former players.
Yeah. He would be closer to the Steve model for sure.
Trying to think of a baseball guy since you mentioned baseball, not Boch.
Very sneaky negative.
Not Boch.
Feels like everybody. I've never met him. I don't know if you've ever talked to him, but like all the people that worked with Aaron Boone when he left playing at ESPN, they love the guy.
That's a good one. I have met Boone.
I mean, I've heard. I know Coward. These people that know him. Just people I don't even know that I just follow about baseball stuff. You ever hear them talk? They fucking love Aaron Boone.
I think
again, another
John
guy doesn't need it.
introduced me to Boone one time, like pregame, and he was very cool. Like the kind of guy that is very cool to you. Like I had somebody the other day tell me that a mutual person introduced them to Stan Van Gundy, and he like looked at him and just like looked away and started continued talking to the person he was talking to.
Stan's an elitist douche. I remember a story a scouting buddy told me within the last couple years at a pro day. He's like, bro, I met John Lynch at the pro day. What a fucking badass. Like just loved him. Just started talking to him. Was very, very nice. I've heard similar things about Mike Tomlin. Like if you just meet him, he's just very cool to you. Thomas Dimitroff, I had a similar situation when I was a scout, met Thomas Dimitroff, couldn't have been any nicer. Actually, twice. He didn't know me, just the Stan Van Gundy types, they try to like portray this, but then you meet him when the camera's not on, they just like won't give you the time of day. And then you meet a guy like Mike Tomlin, just start talking to you. If you start talking to him, doesn't act like he's any better than you. I'd be interested in McVay, what he'd be like. Feels like he'd skew Tomlin. Might just start bullshit with you.
I think so. One time I was doing a basketball game with PJ Carlesimo, and he introduced me to Bill Rafferty because Bill was there for that day. Like we were doing a game and there was a national TV game, and he introduced Bill as, he said, "Hey guy, have you ever met Shithead?" And and Bill Rafferty just started dying laughing, and they just started talking shit to each other. It was an incredible way to meet a person. Have you ever met Shithead? But Shithead is one of the most famous people on TV, sports television. That was a good one. Not a shithead or this shithead, just Shithead.
Yeah. Was he cool?
He was so cool. He was exactly what you think.
Yeah.
Let's see. Next up, John. Here we go. This is from another John. This is John Wynn. A lot of people named John, maybe named after you. 2 top 3 QBs and pick 262 sensation. I might be batshit crazy, but I'm excited about the Niners quarterbacks.
I agree. You know, you got 2 guys competing who, you know, it just, your 2 backups were, now this is the way the NFL works. Like if you just start looking around, a lot of backup quarterbacks can be former high picks. It's the way it happens. Right. I mean, Goff was trending that way till he resurrected his career. Carson became that. It happens fast. But like both these guys are still young. I like that. I would be pretty, and I think it's why Kyle's bullish on Sam and also bullish on Trey about the guy. I think the scary thing is, and I don't know, you know, they've talked about how he's kind of come back, like he's almost cleared now, is even if we come to the grips with, you know, he's never going to be as mobile as I think people had hoped. If he could work on the throwing, not just the mechanics, but just become a more fluid thrower, just become more comfortable at the NFL speed, he hasn't really been able to do that.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's why you said, like, let's see how Purdy comes back from this injury. You know, I feel pretty good about his, as long as he's healthy, like his natural throwing ability, as long as he can keep his legs. Like, if you told me he had shattered an ankle, I'd be like, oh, that's kind of concerning. Again, it's obviously concerning ripping your elbow, but if you just tell me the elbow ultimately comes back to 100%, I don't think he's going to forget how to throw.
No, I'm not worried about him physically. I'm just interested to see, does he have the yip? You know, is he not the yips, but like, is he antsy in the pocket? Is he, you know, that type of thing, just the mental aspect.
Would you say the Niners fully healthy? Not the best, obviously, not the highest paid, the most unique. I mean, they have two third overall picks within a 2-year span, and then the greatest Mr. Relevant that will ever play. I mean,
nothing like it.
There just isn't.
Nothing
there
like
isn't
it.
A group like it.
Yeah, but the problem is this isn't Kyle Shanahan's running back room. It's you. We need a quarterback.
But this is how a lot of position rooms look. Right?
Yes,
like a former high pick who sucks
at other positions, but at other positions.
At other positions, yeah.
At positions where multiple guys get to play. This from Apple Podcast Review. Thank you, 5 stars. Leave a question, helps the podcast. From Rude Boy Rudy. One critique is you guys, best Niners show and objective opinions, but one critique is you guys have the worst adjectives for injuries. Not every injury is a shattered leg or a shattered ankle. To shatter literally means the bone burst into a million pieces. Lance's ankle was dislocated, far different than shattering a bone. As someone who's torn both ACLs, Jesus, proper injury description is important for athletes. Get better with the injuries.
Wasn't it a compound fracture?
Yeah, let's check the tape.
I thought the bone was sticking out, if I remember correctly. And I do think if we're going to go compound fracture, we're not doctors. I think shatter, it's okay to use shatter. Especially after,
fractured fibula, ligament dislocation in the ankle. So we did have a break.
Yeah, I mean, shatter would, I guess, if Tiger Woods falls under his ankle exploded in the car crash, I think shatter's okay.
You know, shatter pulls in the hopes and dreams that also were broken in that moment.
Yeah. I just think simple bone break doesn't do that play justice that everyone was watching was like, it was, if the Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch era, that's probably one of the more jolting just moments, right? When he went down.
You mean that
I'm just
game?
I'm just saying of their era, that individual play is one of the more jolting negative feelings you have. Like, when he's down, you expect him to get back up. Then he doesn't get up, and they go over to him. And once you realize what it is, you immediately goes. That was a crazy Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch era moment, correct?
Yeah.
So it deserves. I guess I'm defending myself, describing it with like a powerful. The word shattered.
Yes. Yeah, I understand. You are not in the emergency room trying to instruct the surgeon how to repair it.
No.
You're saying the moment, you're adding a little dramatics to the moment. Yeah.
I'm adding
so if the same injury happens in an off-season workout that nobody sees, it's just a dislocated ligament and or whatever, broken fibula.
Yeah. Like, remember when Crabtree had an Achilles injury in training or in OTAs? You just say that. If, like, someone rips their Achilles in week 7 against the Philadelphia Eagles, and it's one of the top 6 players, I think we would describe it a little bit differently.
Next up, John. I'm telling you, man, this is crazy. Another John Shoop. Name of the day. Trey Lance takes it to extreme, says John. Some are saying he never got a chance and the coaches screwed him. Others are saying he sucks because he can't play when the Niners wanted to play him and their coaches know football. 1, Trey was given a chance but kept getting injured. Finger, knee, ankle. 2, those injuries also probably mean the coaches don't know what they have, and they clearly have whiffed repeatedly in their QB evals, even with Brock. Basically what we know is this team doesn't know what they have, but more importantly, they don't appear to want to develop a guy while playing him. You know what it makes me think is not to always go back to the draft with Trey, but I'd love to know from Kyle Shanahan today, Kyle, was he more work than you thought he was going to be? Right? Did you anticipate, did your scouts say, hey, this is the mold, this is the clay, this is what we need? Kyle went, okay, fine. And then got in under the hood and realized it was much more work than he anticipated.
I think in the quarterback draft, when you look back to the 2020 college football season, it's one of the great unknowns for some of those younger players that were not viewed. I mean, Fields had, multiple years of tape. He was just a polarizing prospect. Still is. I would say Trey and Zach Wilson, who went 2 and 3, were just, it was unique circumstances. Now, that doesn't mean like this year, 4 guys are going to go in the top 6. And like you always say, just look at the history. More likely 3 out of the 4 of them are going to turn to be backups within 4 or 5 years. Like, that's just the way the football works. So whenever I think like, that 20 weird season fucked everything up. Well, it actually might not. We've seen years since. Same shit happens every single season. So,
yeah,
I don't know.
Zach Wilson might have gone 4th in another year.
Or even if he goes like 15th, it doesn't mean it might have just still ended up with him sitting where he's sitting, right? Not very good. If you can't, there's 2 parts to quarterback play, right? The person, which is very important. Leadership, knowledge, understanding the offense, being the teammate, all that crap. And then there's just like fundamental aspects of your game. Zach Wilson can't complete a wheel route, a slant, like the basic football stuff. Where Trey feels like he's at the next level of nuance, which for a team who has Super Bowl aspirations and definitely at minimum 11, 12 wins a season, that's just the mandate, it's hard to kind of work your way through it. And as Breer said, they were cool with kind of working through it. He was going to get a long leash last year, right? He was going to get a long leash. At minimum, I'd say 6, 7 games before Jimmy came out of the pen. Maybe less if it got ugly, but they were going to get to see it. Those days, he still might need that, like develop through it, and maybe he could pass the threshold of okay, now he's serviceable in these areas, and he can compete to be a top 14 quarterback, which in this league is pretty damn good, right? Your Cousins, Dak.
Those guys get extended and paid a lot of money.
Yeah. If he needs work to get through that threshold, I think this goes back to his time with the Niners is done. If somehow this offseason he's just at that spot where it's you can win with this guy, I think he's in pretty good shape. It's just unknown, right? I think he's a true unknown that they're not willing, they've admitted now, they're not willing to go too far into the wilderness with it anymore.
If he had not been, if he and Brock Purdy were both undrafted free agents, I think Brock would have been ahead of him on the depth chart to start last season.
You're saying if he was an undrafted free agent, or let's just say let's use 6th round
they were
pick
both 6th rounders
from the previous year and impressed them and became the backup, and then he was competing to be the number 1. And you're saying Brock then was a 7th round pick and came in last year. You think Brock beats him out? You're saying based on the camp, or at least starts rotating.
My point being, Brock didn't have to actually get into a game to make them feel like they had something. We know that because they spent money on Nate Sudfeld and replaced Nate. Now the stakes are lower with the 3rd string quarterback. But, yeah, I think even before he played, if the stakes were the same in terms of where they were drafted, I think Brock would have been ahead of him by the time they got to week 1. based on the offseason preseason.
Do you know what I find funny is like the people, and this gets back to the internet and people that defend Trey. It's like, guys, the evidence now, let's just use the two guys in charge. One guy's a Hall of Fame defensive player who played against all the best quarterbacks and good quarterbacks and every type quarterback. And another is the offensive play caller / head coach who now has 6 playoff victories under his belt over the last 4 seasons. Those guys are telling you. So it's like, well, this is haven't they built up enough equity now to be like, yeah, they know something? Because that's what I struggle with, the guys that are like putting their flag in the ground. This guy's really good. Like, what are you basing that off of? Not a 60% passer in his time with one of the best teams. And then the two guys in charge whose resumes, Kyle's resume is shorter. Right? He's only 6 years as head coach, but in the last 4 years, 6 playoff victories, multiple division titles. And John Lynch, even if you question like what's his role as a GM, like if Kyle as a player, super, super high level. Even if you wanted to argue, like, is he really Hall of Fame? He was a fucking stud on one of the best defenses ever. Saw all these players. At the time, Favre was in his division, played against Young, played against Aikman, knows exactly what it looks like. You and I go to these practices, he sits from the big picture view back where safeties sit, just farther back now, right? But he's comfortable. That's how he sees the game. These guys are telling you that. Like, they're telling you that. Not, you can be like, MIDDLEKAUFF, you don't know what you're talking about, Haberman, or you hate her, this guy, that guy. Okay. That's your but those guys, you're just saying that John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan are fucking nuts on this one. Then that's what you're saying. These guys don't know shit.
I think that people who are saying that are saying using 2 ingredients. One, we haven't seen enough yet to discount him, is the main ingredient.
No one's discounting him in the
sense. I'm just saying if somebody,
him.
I think if somebody says, I still think he's promising, it's 2 ingredients. One is we haven't seen enough yet, and the second ingredient is hope. But I would understand if someone's like, yeah, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have not earned that I should just blindly believe that they're right about what they see in a quarterback.
I mean, Jimmy turned out to be a starting quarterback in a lot of wins, and Brock Purdy, 7th round pick, fucking turned out to be okay.
Yeah, I mean, they drafted Brock Purdy at the last pick of the 7th round, so they rolled the dice a couple of times that somebody else was going to draft him.
It's good market value.
Well, they nailed it. And they got a little, I said the other day they got lucky, and someone's like, they didn't get lucky, Brock, blah, 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 and Niners, this and this. They didn't get lucky that once they got him, they worked with him and it worked. They got lucky that they didn't draft him earlier and he didn't get drafted by somebody else. That's luck.
My problem when you use the word hope,
yeah,
I understand if you're the Panthers, you're the Bears, when I was doing the Raiders post game, like you had to, hold on to that. That's all you had, right? You're just, team sucks. Always drafting high. Hope is, you might as well be the franchise motto. There's no fucking hope with this team. This team's fucking kicking the shit out of people. This is a fucking machine. I mean, what are we talking about? Hope? And you're right. I mean, I do agree. Like but how hope? What the fuck are we hoping for? This team's fucking showing up week 1, planning on beating the fuck out of whoever they're playing. Hope, and they've proven they can do it with everybody. So, like, these guys either good enough or he's not. And again, all for hope if I'm the Texans and I see a little bit out of who was the Stanford quarterback? Davis Mills. Like, if he has some moments like that, I understand clinging to that if you're not winning games. If you're watching this, listening to this, you watch 49ers, hope. I mean, they're curb-stomping teams. What are we talking about? This ain't about hope. This is about trying to get over the hump and win those last couple of playoff games.
Yeah, but the problem is they don't really have solidified other options, right? We think Brock will be that. He showed that he could be that, but you're not exactly dealing with full glasses across the board here. Everything's a little off. Brock looked good, but he's hurt and he didn't play that much. Sam Darnold's been on 3 teams now. So, you kind of, these recipes are all missing an ingredient.
Well, listen, I can nitpick on individual games, an individual play call by Kyle, or like a decision on a 4th down to punt or whatever. I do think he's now earned the right. 3 playoffs, 4 years, averaging 2 playoff victories in all 3 of those seasons. Like I do think I feel pretty good about like he can make who his couple quarterbacks are. Returning Purdy, Darnold, if it's Trey, like he's kind of proven it. Now we can nitpick him, like can he win the big one? Oh, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But like Can he win me 12, 13 games and kick the shit out of Mike McCarthy in the second round? Pound Pete Carroll in a big game? Like I think he's earned that right.
100%. But we've established that he can do that. You and I agree on that. Not everybody agrees on that, but you and I agree on that.
But I think the word hope, when it comes to sports fans, right? Like you have a child, like you hope he's really successful and finds love, and like hope is a powerful feeling. But I think as sports fans, like if you're a Yankee fan, you're not hoping to be good. Like it's like we better fucking lock this down so when the ALCS comes, we don't get rolled by the Astros. Like the Niners aren't in the hope business now. They're in the win the Super Bowl business. I don't think hope's part of their vernacular. Besides,
but it's just they hope not to get hurt.
Yeah.
But they're in this position not because they are hoping so much about Trey. They're in this position because they have no other option but to be in this position.
Like if you're a San Francisco Giants fan, you just like hope we're competitive. You know? I have a hard time with
what you're saying about the team.
Hope.
What you're saying about the team, I agree with. I understand a fan saying when there is so much hype that leads up to a prospect getting drafted and then being developed and all of that, that a fan goes, I'm not. Why should I throw that all away based on a game and a half that I've seen? Now, I'm not in the meetings with the coaches. I'm not at all the practices with the players. I'm not in the locker room with all of them.
I just find it easier to pivot when 10, what they win this year, 13, 23 wins and 4 playoff victories the last 2 years. Like usually when you do that, your franchise is set back because you've drafted, the wrong guy, right? You have taken player X who's not your quarterback. You've sucked those couple years. Like we're nowhere farther from where we were a couple years. That's not the case here, right? When they made that trade, they were drafting 12th. They were coming off the bad year. And I would say it's been Trey's career is one of the most unique things we've ever seen through like 2 years, clearly, even based on his backstory, based on where he's drafted, based on the trade. But then the 2 years that came the moment he was picked have been pretty incredible. Right? I mean, The 2 NFC Championship games sucked, but beside the Eagles, Chiefs, the Packers, who have been wildly successful, would gladly trade those couple years, given their last 2 years, right? They didn't even make the playoffs last year. So it just shows you, like, they're in the upper echelon right now. I mean, their quarterback situation, I would say it was somewhat unfigured out long term. But, like, if you told me Sam Darnold's their starting quarterback for 17 games, even if he's not quite as good as he was the last 6 games, but he's not as bad, like they're winning double-digit games. I feel very confident saying that.
But I think it's fair to say that either the Niners screwed up the evaluation or the Niners screwed up understanding their own situation with Trey Lance.
Well, I think they knew the situation last year. They were uneasy.
But I mean, when they drafted him, like they either made a mistake.
They made a mistake.
So like then it's fair to say they don't get blind confidence that this time they're getting it right.
But you make mistakes in the draft, right?
Yeah, but they did it with one of the biggest. They did it in a 3-for-1 first round pick trade, right?
I
so
think
they did it on a different level than.
I think philosophically, right? If we just took a step back and got the top 10 living general managers in a room who were, alive, whether it's Polians of the world, Ozzie Newsome's to the guys working right now, just trading a lot of draft assets to move up and get to a spot that's where you don't control the draft, a good idea? Like if you just take that overwhelming, it's a flawed premise to attack that way. It's just very risky because your options are immediately limited, right? I think they philosophically
you're painting yourself into it. You're painting yourself into a corner.
Yeah. Philosophically, I think everyone has to be on board with, like, God, they took a huge swing, cool with it. But when you really look at the swing they took, it was like kind of a flawed. The mechanism behind it, given that where they were going to end up, was pretty crazy. Now, maybe they would say, well, even if we had got to 2, knowing that Trevor Lawrence is basically, we're drafting at 1 because we know the guy's, off the board at 1 no matter what, we still would have taken Trey Lance at 2, which I think is probably the case. Who knows? Maybe they would have taken Zach Wilson, but it's pretty crazy. We've seen it happen twice now in both. Well, we'll see how Trey plays out. But with Sam, and they traded from 6 to 3, not on draft night. Like if you do that on draft night, completely understand it because you have specific. Like they did it kind of open-minded. Then they argued through the players. I do think it's fair to say that Kyle was very much smitten with the New England quarterback, right?
Yeah.
So
if you told him then, if you sit where you are, you could get Mac Jones, I think he would have done that.
Because, for example, the Panthers traded up way before the draft to go number 1. And you might read, and I heard some people say, like, I've heard some buzz that Anthony Richardson. I'm cool with not knowing exactly who you're going to take. Go to it all, play it all out. You control the draft. No, we're going to take a quarterback. Let's take the best quarterback in this draft. We don't specifically like have our ranking in stone, but we don't give a shit. We'll go up there and we'll figure it out. That, like what the Panthers did ultimately is different than what the 49ers did, right? Because they can pick whoever they want out of the group.
Yeah, yeah.
So
it's still not ideal, right? If you haven't evaluated the position yet, but it's better than the Niners situation.
A lot better.
Niners weren't just, it was like, even teams have gone up to draft the second quarterback, right?
Because ultimately Sam Darnold was the second guy off the board that year.
That's what happened that year, right?
Yeah. I think Chase Young might have been the second guy. Whoever, it was a defensive player. Forget exactly. But yeah. They just took, I mean, if they could do that over again, right, they would have taken Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, Josh Allen.
Trade back to 31 and take Lamar.
Yeah, exactly.
Take Josh Allen a few years before. Yeah. Here we are. Can't wait to see how it plays out. Anything else to add here?
No. I think I think this quarterback class actually feels a lot like that 49ers year. The difference in this one is there's not a Trevor Lawrence. Like, even as shitty as Trevor's rookie year was, I think everyone's going to throw that away. He's going to age pretty gracefully, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he had a pretty legendary 4 picks in a playoff game and then come back 4 touchdowns and win the thing. Like, that was a pretty legendary early career moment of just like, God damn, this guy is unfazed. A lot of guys would have gone in the tank. Most years when you draft these young quarterbacks, I actually think drafting quarterbacks, for the most part, beside the Lucks and the Trevor Lawrences, is a lot like NBA prospects. You're just kind of keeping your fingers crossed. You really are. Injuries, talent development. It's just so many unknowns, you know? Like
congrats on you get 3 meetings and you get to throw the guy on the whiteboard a few times. That's very different than when you get thrown into the fire during an NFL season.
And I think the difference is like in college football. I talked to a buddy yesterday. He's like, you know, some people I know really like Will Levis, and one thing they do to defend him is like Rich Biscaccia. Am I saying his name? No, that's the Raiders. Who's Scangarello?
Scangarello.
I don't think he's highly thought of in football circles by a lot of people. And they say if Liam Cohen, your Jewish brother, who's actually now back at Kentucky, would have not left the Rams and just been his coach back-to-back years, they're like, I think he might be the number 1 overall pick. Because based off the year with Liam, he was really highly thought of. He had all that Josh Allen momentum kind of coming into his year. And he's like, what if it was just like Rich's kind of stinks? He's been fired by the Eagles. He was fired by Stoops. Kyle kind of shoved him to the side. What if he's just awful? And unlike in basketball, where the most part, like, the scheme doesn't limit like your athleticism. Like, you can kind of see things. In football, it's hard, right? Like, Will Levis might just be good if he just gets Doug Peterson or Kyle Shanahan or Sean McVay, right? He might, but he also just might be bad. I don't know. There's just so many variables. And back to the Trey thing, you can't even make up the amount of variables, right? It's not just like one thing. It's like 15 different things. It's crazy.
It is crazy. By the way, Matt, our buddy Matt from Pink Onion Pizza says, is this the opening day pod? Yeah, here's a baseball question for you, John. We kind of talked about it today. More likely to be traded by September in this is year 3? No. This is year 4 for Joey Bart. Joey Bart or Trey Lance? Joey Bart not starting on opening day for the Giants in place of a journeyman Rule 5 draft catcher. So that's
is it one of those like righty-lefty things?
I think it's one of those it's coming to an end things.
Yeah. Baseball's hard.
Baseball is hard. I mean, he played in the big leagues. He got 11 big league homers, man. That's here's a little programming note for everybody on the way out the door. Green Glassville says, I was cracking up watching Jamarcus Russell highlights and lowlights last night. So if you're looking for something on YouTube, that sounds like a fun video to watch.
I do think it's pretty legendary to have one of the great baseball seasons of all time. Make the Yankees pay you like $150 more million than they already wanted to pay you, which was like $220 million. Come back in your first AB for the Yankees as team captain and hit a home run to straightaway center. That's a pretty just like, if you were in the yard, the opening, it was worth it right there. Like Judge hits an opening day home run, you're sitting there. Like even if they had lost the game, that was like, it's all worth it.
I was watching. It was awesome. And then Cole is just mowing down Giants. Just mowing them down. And then Judge struck out in his next couple ABs, but he did what they came to see.
Well, I get 1 for 4 with a bomb. I mean, I'm good.
Yeah. How about Volpe wearing? He called Brett Gardner to ask him if he could wear 11. New Yankee shortstop.
He looks sweet.
Yeah, it looks good.
Giants even
walked in his first AB. Just looks like he belongs, John.
Yeah. I see a lot of. We were talking about this yesterday. It feels like a lot of teams. Maybe it's just. I don't even know if all these guys are top prospects. Every team wants to put out like you made the squad video, so it's hard to tell. Like, is this guy the next like Derek Jeter or Alex Rodriguez? Obviously, the Cardinals guy is like he's a 20-year-old. But I saw a bunch of Volpe. He might be, but I'm sorry, the Angels or something. This guy just might be a scrub. They just need to fill the 25th spot, and he's crying for his mom.
Which I love that video too. Like that video, 7 years in the minors, is an awesome video. But I'm just so tired of the like. Well, man, this is a tough one. You've done everything right. And, it's days like these that sitting in my chair carries a lot of weight. But we're going to have to take you with us to San Francisco. Oh! It's like, I don't know. Imagine if every big thing that happened in your life, that's how people delivered the news to you, Like, your wife, she gave birth. And it's not always easy to tell you this, but this is a tough one, man. Baby's all good. Everything's fine. Congratulations. Like, what the fuck? Like, it's not your day. Like, you didn't make the big leagues. It's not your information to fuck around with. Just tell the guy who made the big leagues and let him enjoy his lifetime of hard work. This is not your fucking moment because your 22-year-old social media manager tells you it's going to get 2 million views on the internet. Like, just let the guy enjoy the moment. Stop fucking with people's future. I mean, this is so stupid.
What is the baseball manager? In football, you're scheming all week, right? In basketball, you're actually not at the office that often. Shoot around, go home, come back for the game. They don't have to do that much. The baseball manager, it does feel like, is at his desk throughout the year for a lot. What is he doing? What? Like, he's not setting the lineup at a lot of teams. What's he doing, guy? Like,
yeah, so baseball manager's like doorman. Like, he's just got to be there in case, of the building in case a package gets delivered.
What time? What time is he showing up? Noon?
2? Yeah, 1.
What time do you think a guy like Bob Melvin? What time do you think on average he's there throughout the year?
I'm trying to remember. Like, for a 7:00 game, I used to get to the park at like at least by 3, 2:30. He'd be there already, I think.
Some guys get there like around lunch, workout.
Well, you meet with the GM, maybe, like that organization, like you meet with the GM and you set the lineup.
But you agree they are at their desk sitting there doing,
you might be going through like last night's like minor leagues, like, going through reports on guys. You might be writing,
individual meetings with your own players that are up or down, like mentally.
Yeah, I mean I don't think it's a big amount of your time. You're not out there hitting ground balls or early work. You're not doing that.
It'd be really easy to get super fat, either as a baseball player, definitely as a baseball manager. Like
you're just part of the
fat.
Oh, physically fat, yeah.
Physically fat.
I don't know. These guys hours in the dugout, just eating a candy bar or something.
How as a player do you stay skinny? Especially if you're a backup.
It's probably a lot of just like natural good body types because you see it all the time. Like,
yeah, I get like guys.
Dudes hit 30 and they're not skinny anymore.
No.
See, because you're right. You're not burning 700 calories in a baseball game. Probably.
I feel like Bochy got to the yard at like 10 a.m.
Yeah.
He was there all day. Like, live there. Literally,
I mean,
think it was across
it's
the
a
street.
great place to just
Yeah.
stuff happens, and before you know it, the game starts. You know.
Yeah. Or you start hearing that ball, and you're like, you just walk out to BP.
Yeah. You just sit there, just.
He's back. I mean,
I know he's coaching the Rangers. Are they playing right now?
DeGrom pitching? Or is he already injured?
I thought he was already hurt. Let's check in on the Rangers. What we got here? Rangers are trailing. Verlander got hurt today.
Who started for the old Bogies?
We got Aaron Nola against
Are they playing the Phillies?
Oh no, I don't know who that is. Rangers, who pitched? Raggins? Burke. Somebody named no, that's a bullpen. What the fuck?
No, DeGrom started.
Well, what is going on here with the
Your ESPN.com acting weird?
No, I'm on my MLB.com. Here we go.
I'm
not in baseball shape yet.
DeGrom got shelled.
7 Ks though in 3 2/3. 5 earned.
You see the guy from Sac, Reese Hoskins? You see him tear his ACL the way he did it?
I didn't see how he do it.
Just kind of routine grounder where he's kind of, behind the bag, almost to the grass, just your classic, like, kind of pivot to do a little flippy to the pitcher.
Got
and
stuck.
He kind of just made a move and just hits the ground.
Oh.
And then the next day, the Phillies tweeted out, broken heart emoji. It was bad.
Yeah, thanks for the broken heart. Again, a man's real life, and we're going broken heart emoji.
Well, it was like he had tweeted something, and, they...
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed, though, the Phillies have missing like 3 guys. Doesn't even matter.
Well, they got Trey. Their top of the order is Turner, Schwarber, Real Muto.
JT was our catcher in the WBC, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, they got the top 3 hitters were in the WBC. Turner, Schwarber, Real Muto.
And if Bryce was healthy, he would have been there.
Yeah, and Reese. Was Reese there?
Well, because Goldsmith's there. I think he might not have made the team. But so their top 4 hitters would all be, they would all be like top 6 players. JT might be about like 8 or 9. But, yeah, Bryce, Trey Turner would be 1 or 3. Schwarber could easily be like 5. Yeah, they're pretty stacked. They're going to be good.
Let's see, what's Scherzer doing today? Checking all the old Mets. Might watch the Mets after this here.
Got a lot of base. Why not just start in the middle of the day, opening day?
Remember when they used to do it like a single Thursday night game? It's like a single Monday night game up against the national championship game.
No, the one year they started in Japan. Remember?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They've done that a few times. Oh, Scherzer hasn't taken the mound yet. Scherzer against Mets, Marlins. All right.
That's your hot stove.
That's your hot stove. Thanks for hanging with us, everybody.